that we can capture. I want to welcome everyone to our session today with Whitney Jacobus from Safelight. Whitney's going to be talking to us about this important community partner and how we here at Blue Ridge can benefit from this knowledge and use it to help connect our students and members of our community with the help that they may need at different times in their lives. So without much further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Whitney, and thank you all again for attending today's session. If you have questions at any time, I'm sure Whitney's open to you just taking yourself off mute and asking, but you can also feel free to use the chat.
Yes,
Hey, Whitney, it's
thank
all
you,
yours.
Sarah. Thank you. Yes, hi everybody. My name is Whitney. Can everybody see my screen okay? Okay, great. I am the outreach manager at Safelight, and we'll go through the different departments a little bit so we learn what that means exactly. But my goal for today is really to give y'all a better idea of what Safelight services exist and how we can connect folks to Safelight services, and also a little bit about, some domestic violence 101. And like Sarah said, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to shout out or put it in the chat, or we can circle back at the end too to make sure there's no lingering thoughts popping up for you. So our mission at Safelight is to create hope, heal lives, and change community. This picked photo is a photo from our recent, our resale store was renovated and expanded, and so that's a photo from that ribbon cutting. At Safelight, we serve a lot of folks. Domestic violence is the big thing that comes up that's really easier to identify. But we really help anybody who's experienced, witnessed violence, abuse, or exploitation. So that can look like domestic violence or intimate partner violence or interpersonal violence. So that can be with other community members, that can be folks in your family, in your home, doesn't necessarily have to be an intimate partner. And violence can look like sexual assault, human trafficking, child abuse, neglect, or exploitation. And a very underreported one is elder abuse, neglect, or exploitation. So what is domestic violence? So when thinking about domestic violence, it's when there's a power differential in a relationship. So there's one partner or person in the relationship that's trying to gain power and control over the other person. They're trying to manipulate that situation. And one thing that I really like to highlight is that domestic violence does not discriminate. It can happen in same-sex relationships. It can happen at all different ages. People that have, really fantastic, well-paying jobs. They're well-known in the community. It can happen to anybody. Sometimes it's a lot harder to hear about it when folks are in positions of power, because that might be something that's a little bit more stigmatized. And so we don't always hear about it, but I just want to reiterate that it can happen to anyone at any time in their lives. And so on the right here, we have our power and control wheel. And on the outside, you'll see the physical forms of abuse. So that can be hitting, slapping, kicking, punching, sexual violence. Any of that kind of encompasses that's automatically somebody's trying to gain power and control over the other one. But inside of this wheel is also a bunch of different spokes. And so there's a lot of different ways that abuse can look like in a relationship. And just very briefly, using coercion and threats. So that can be, threatening somebody, if you don't do this, then I will do that. Using intimidation. If you've ever thought about, you get a look from somebody and you just know that you better do what they say or there's going to be consequences for it. Using emotional abuse. So that can be putting somebody down, calling them names. Oh, you're acting just like your mother. Things like that are really common. Using isolation. And this doesn't happen overnight. This is a slow buildup. But when we see isolation happening, that's oftentimes you're like, oh, I love you more than that person does. They don't want what's best for you. I want what's best for you. I know what's best for you. I think you should not hang out with them tonight. I just want to spend time alone together. Moving into minimizing, denying, and blaming. So that can be gaslighting, trying to make somebody believe that what they thought happened or what reality was didn't actually happen, or like, oh, I didn't push you down the stairs, you fell down the stairs. Or that could look like, um, oh, stop being so dramatic, like you just fractured it. It's not even really broken. Don't worry about it. Using children. So there's a couple of ways that that can look. That could be either using the children by withholding the children from the other partner. That could look like withholding child support. That could look like telling the children things that maybe you don't want them to know, or making her feel like you'll hear me interchange genders. I'll just note that we talked about domestic violence, going across all genders, all, sexual orientations. It can happen to anyone. Statistically, women are more likely to be the victims of domestic violence. So oftentimes, you might hear me say a gendered description, but I do switch them up, and just, I hope you know that it can happen to anyone at any time. So I just caught myself and wanted to address it. But using children, making somebody feel like a bad parent. Again, because women are often the victims of domestic violence, there is inherent privilege that comes with being a male. And so oftentimes that male privilege is used in the relationship. That it goes down to some inherent beliefs that, I believe that I'm the man of the house and you're going to do as I say, and I'm going to decide what we spend the money on. Kind of the one that makes the rules and the decisions in the house. Using economic abuse, again, that can kind of all of these can be interchanged. We know that we can see multiple of them at the same time, but economic abuse often looks like preventing her from getting or keeping a job, or forcing her to work. Again, I'm looking at this and it uses very gendered descriptions, but forcing your partner to work, giving them an allowance, or not letting them go visit their family members, or go do the things that they want to do that can help them create finances for themselves. Not letting them have their own bank account, keeping money in a separate bank account yourself, and not putting, every relationship is different, how you handle finances, but keeping money, or using children or child abuse, all of that is a form of abuse. And so again, all of these are different ways that abuse can show up in a relationship. Abuse is not always physical or violent or sexual, but it can be. And so oftentimes, if you're starting to see abuse coming in one of these spokes, eventually you'll start to see the other ones trickle in. And so all of those together form a power and control dynamic that allows one person to abuse the other person. And so how do we identify this? What are some ways to notice this, whether that's with the students that we see, whether that's with friends and family members or our coworkers, but noticing some signs and symptoms, like if one of your friends is telling you like, oh, I don't want to do that today because I think that my partner would get really upset by it. That could be an indication that there's something bigger going on. Somebody showing up with frequent injuries that don't really align or make sense, or they're just really frequent. Isolating from friends and families, you start to see people pull away slowly from their relationships and not be as close with their families as they used to be. Extreme jealousy or wanting to know where somebody is all of the time. All of these are just little things that we can start to pick up on. And to notice. And so, what do we do with the warning signs? That can be a really uncomfortable situation. Okay, I see these things happening, and now what do I do about it? Well, one, I always just encourage talking to your person that you care about and letting them know that you're there for them and you see a couple of things that are a little concerning and want to check in with them and let them know about it. Please, if they're in Henderson County, let them know about Safelight and say, hey, I don't know if this applies to you, but this could be an option. Maybe you call them, maybe you don't, but letting them know about more and more resources that are available can be the seed that is planted that maybe it's a week later, maybe it's months later, maybe it's years later. We don't really know how our words can affect people. And so just by dropping a little care and concern and letting people know that there are resources available, maybe they do a little research on their own, maybe they don't self-identify as being in a violent relationship. Or maybe that's the seed that plants and they realize that they eventually want more. And so you just offering care and support and asking people and letting them know what you're seeing could be what they need to be able to leave an abusive relationship. And these are just a couple of impacts that we know that domestic violence can have on survivors. Domestic violence, elder abuse, any forms of abuse or exploitation. Of course, there's physical injuries. Along with that comes mental health effects, anxiety, depression, PTSD, worrying in future relationships if it's going to end up like a previous relationship, having some attachment disorders. All of those make a ton of sense, right? Also think about the social consequences. If you've been isolated for so long from your friends and family, how easy is it going to be to call them up and just try to rekindle a friendship? Some of us have really wonderful, amazing, close-knit support groups that would understand, and some people don't. Some people have been moved away from their family members and don't know anybody in the community to reach out to. So those social consequences, not having any connection to any faith-based organizations or friends or neighbors, to not have anything around you, that's really hard. First of all, at any stage in your life, it can be really hard to build community and natural supports, but especially after you've been isolated for so long and emotionally abused to the point where you don't know that you're worth having something, that can be really hard to build up those social supports again. And then, of course, the economic consequences. So we talked about financial abuse. Oftentimes in abusive relationships, one person is staying at home and tending to the children. Maybe they haven't worked in years, and so now they have to figure out how to function in society again. They have to overcome some social anxiety from being isolated for so long, and they have no funds to be able to leave the abusive relationship. And so starting over can just be really overwhelming. There's so many different pieces to manage. And so that kind of leads into why people stay and why support matters. Again, there's so many different impacts on people, and we don't know what background they're coming from. So sometimes there are a lot of cultural or religious reasons why people would want to stay in an abusive relationship. Maybe it's against their faith to leave. Maybe they're worried that their family will disown them if they get a divorce. Sometimes, again, using children as a form of power and control, but that fear for safety for yourself or for your children. If somebody is using your children against you, they could threaten to harm your children. We also know that the most dangerous time for a survivor to leave, or a victim, so I kind of use those terms intentionally. So a survivor, we do talk about after they've successfully left a domestic violence situation. Because sometimes people don't leave the domestic violence situations, and so then they're either continuously a victim, and unfortunately sometimes don't make it out of that. So we know that the most dangerous time for a person to leave a domestic violence situation is the moment that they're leaving. That is the most dangerous. The highest chance of lethality comes from actually leaving a relationship. We also know that on average, it takes a survivor 7 times to leave a relationship before they're able to do so for good. And oftentimes it comes back to these pieces that we're talking about: the financial dependence, the emotional attachment, the isolation. Oh my gosh, it's so hard to start over, even if you're not going through all of these challenges, but to have no support system in place, or have no finances, or to be scared that you're gonna, like, you're just safer in that relationship because that's a known relationship, right? You know what the abuse is, you know what that's like, and so far you've figured out how to survive in it. If you're leaving that, you don't know what's out there. It could be worse than the situation that you're in right now. How am I going to be able to afford a new apartment? Is my abuser going to find me? There's so many different factors. And so sometimes it feels safer to stay in an abusive relationship. There was another piece about that I needed to say. Why support helps. So Safelight offers so many different programs, and it's really wonderful because these can be a stepping stone. Again, we talked about planting seeds for people, getting them connected to resources, letting them know what resources are available. Our goal is to change that number from 7 times to leave a relationship down. Even if we could get it to 6 times or 5 times, that could be the difference between staying in an abusive relationship for good, or maybe dying in an abusive relationship, or never making it out. Our goal is to let people know that there are resources available to make those next steps a little bit easier. So we can offer emotional support and counseling. We can get people connected to resources. We can help them and empower them by letting them know about all the resources that are available, and letting them make an informed choice. Because sometimes when people are stuck in this over on the left, why people stay, and they can't see a way out, at least if they know about the resources, then they can make an informed decision if they want to stay in the relationship or not. We also know that this ongoing trauma is a lot more likely to impact your children if you stay in the relationship. So by staying in the relationship, the children are seeing this pattern play out, and that's what they think is normal and acceptable and okay. And our goal is to break that generational cycle of abuse, and to teach people that there's better ways and healthier ways of having a relationship. So these are a couple of statistics about all of the different things and how big our problem is. So domestic violence, we know that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men experience intimate partner violence in their lives. Also, I would just want to note that a lot of these numbers, this is what's being reported. There are so many cases, whether that's child abuse, sexual assault, domestic violence, elder abuse, all of this. These are numbers that people have told us about. There's a lot of stigma in asking for support. There's a lot of people that don't know what resources are available. There's a lot of people that don't have resources available. And so a lot of these numbers are really skewed. Also, just so everybody knows, today is October 1st, right? Yes, today is the beginning of October. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So it's very fitting that we get to have this training today, because looking at statistics like this and understanding a little bit more about what is going on in our community helps to, again, break that cycle of abuse. Human trafficking is something that is not often talked about, but we also know that in Henderson County, we're in a prime spot for human trafficking. The reason for that is we're really close to a lot of different state borders. You can be in a different state in an hour, you know, going in multiple different directions. We're also really close to the interstate. And so human trafficking is a very large issue, and it's often not talked about because it's hard to report and it's hard to identify. And sometimes there are cases like the DA's office, the district attorney's office might not label something as human trafficking because maybe the survivor doesn't self-identify as being a victim of human trafficking. And we also know that there's often a lot of times where there's force and coercion, which makes it human trafficking. There's a minor and there's force and there's coercion, and that is by definition what human trafficking is. And so there's a lot of times the DA's office wants to label something that they know that it can be prosecuted with. And at the same time, that leaves for a lot of cases that are underreported and not talked about. And so our number, North Carolina ranks 10th in the US. That number honestly vacillates between 8 and 10, depending on the year and how many are reported in that year. But we're somewhere between 8 and 10 for the most reported cases of human trafficking. And we also know that, you know, in 2000, this statistic on here says in 2022, 6 were in North Carolina and 1 was in Western North Carolina. We also, just being a community partner of PISGA Legal Services, we know that there are a lot more cases happening. And so these are the ones that are prosecuted and officially on the statistics, but that actual number is a lot higher. Elder abuse is also something that is really underreported because oftentimes the people that are perpetrators of elder abuse are the caregivers of the elderly person. It's often the person, whether that's a family member or a mental medical provider or a nurse, or, you know, maybe somebody's in an assisted living home. You know, if there's not a lot of people coming to check in on the elder, on that person, then who's going to report them? So if the person taking care of you is the one abusing you, it's going to be really hard for anybody else to know about it. So where does Safelight fit in? Well, Safelight has manifested a lot over the years. Since its opening in 1984, we have served over 46,000 survivors. And we do offer a continuum of care to really help survivors. Oftentimes folks are coming to us in the middle of a crisis, and we want to help them through that crisis period, but we also want to provide a long-term care and support so to get them in a position where they can live sustainably on their own again in a healthy way. We're really fortunate. We have amazing community partners that we work with, such as PISGA Legal Services, law enforcement, Blue Ridge Health. There's so many wonderful people that have partnered with us. And we'll talk a little bit more when we get into our programs. So a little bit about Safelight's history. I'll just pick out some important dates in here. Safelight started as Mainstay back in 1984. A couple of important pieces are when Safelight all came under one roof. So we used to have, you know, our FJC was downtown and our shelter was in one location, and we had a counseling center over here, and there was kind of all of these different pieces. Today, it's really wonderful. We have one office administration building on Washington Street, and in that one building houses our family advocacy center, our counseling center, our child advocacy center, and our outreach department and our administration. So people can come right to that one location, and if they need to go between departments, we can do that warm handoff. It's a lot easier for folks to find us and know where to get help. And then we have our Fifth Avenue location. So we have a shelter, we also have a resale store and our Dandelion Cafe, which are all over on Fifth Avenue. A really wonderful addition in 2023, we had some animal kennels added to our shelter. So thinking about ways that people would stay in a relationship that's abusive is if you can't bring your pets with you. Oftentimes pets are regarded as family members and children. And if people can't bring their pets with them, they're less likely to leave an abusive situation. So since 2023, when our shelters opened, our kennels open, excuse me. It's wonderful. We have 3 dog kennels and 4 cat kennels. And they are pretty much full all the time. It's wonderful. So we partner again with Blue Ridge Health. They come in and they provide some veterinary care for the animals if they need it. They provide some dog food and cat food for us. Moving on, we've got a lot to get there, so I'll try and be mindful and just pick out a couple more important parts. But in 2024, we started our first Camp Hope America program, which is really exciting. So we're now in our 3rd year of Camp Hope America, which is a program for children who've been exposed to violence. In 2025, so just in September, we now offer SANE exams, which are sexual assault nurse examinations here at Safelight. So if folks don't feel comfortable going to a hospital, they can come right to Safelight at any hour of the day. We have trained nurses on staff 24/7. And so if our hotline receives a call, if a local hospital receives a call that there is a domestic violence or a sexual assault, and they are looking for an exam, they have the option of coming to Safelight to have that exam by a trauma-informed sexual assault nurse examiner that's accompanied by a Safelight advocate. So that has been a really wonderful addition. You know, there are a couple of pieces with our sexual assault nurse examinations. Because we haven't had a great space in Henderson County for people to go, people often have to travel to different hospitals to find the sexual assault nurse that's on staff. And sometimes people are transferred to Buncombe County. It's been really challenging to have a stable place in Henderson County for victims. And since we've opened in September, and I'd say, you know, this is on average, and it ebbs and flows. So you know, who knows why this has happened, but I think in the last year, we maybe received 8 or 9 calls for our advocates to go and support at a hospital. And in the last month, since we've opened on September 1st, we've had 2 calls, and both of those calls have come to Safelight. So it was just such a smoother process. We have a shower right here. So after the exam, the victim or the survivor can shower and get comfortable. They don't have to wait in the emergency department for hours on end waiting to be seen. They're with somebody that knows, is trauma informed, and can help immediately get them connected to resources. So that is a really amazing, wonderful thing that is new this last month. And we are doing a shelter expansion, which I will talk about in just a minute. So here's a quick overview of our programs. And we'll get into them a little bit more. So our shelter, we have a 24/7 shelter and hotline. So currently we have 40 beds open, and some of our rooms they're dormitory style. So some of them have, you know, anywhere from 2 to 6 beds in one room. We try to keep families private in their own room, but we're currently undergoing renovations. And so soon we'll have about 55 beds available. And the wonderful thing about this renovation is that we're creating smaller rooms. And so the idea is to give people more privacy and, you know, a little bit more individual space. We are an emergency shelter, which means that folks that are in immediate danger, fleeing an abusive relationship, can come and seek shelter there. Now, oftentimes, domestic violence shelters, there's either like a 90-day or there's like a cap on how long you can stay in shelter. We don't have a cap on how long you can stay. Of course, our goal is self-sustainability. So there's a couple of requirements. We're gonna work with you every week on case management and figure out some goals and turn that into actionable steps. How can we apply for housing? Do you have a job yet? What are the steps that we need to do to to get a job? What does filling out an application look like? What's your resume look like? So those are all things that we work with folks on, and we don't kick them out after 3 months, because that we know after learning about all of the abuse that they've been through, all of the social abuse, all of the economic abuse, to be able to find a place to live in 3 months, let alone, but that by itself is challenging. But to factor in all of the other things, we wouldn't be setting people up for success. That recidivism rate of folks going back to their abusive partner would be a lot higher if we didn't allow them to stay as long as they needed to. So we talked about our on-site kennels for cats and dogs. We also, so many of our programs are supported through community relationships and sponsors and donors. So I'm looking at this book that says all basic needs are met while in shelter. So that includes food, clothing, toiletries. Now have been so fortunate. We have so many people come and donate, shampoo and conditioner and meals. And if you've ever donated to our resale store, anybody that's staying in our shelter gets vouchers to go down to our resale store and get clothes. Maybe they need to pick out an outfit to go to a new job interview, or maybe they left an abusive relationship with only the clothes that are on their backs and they have children with them and no diapers. We're going to get them set up with all of their basic needs, and a lot of that comes from our community support. And folks, I didn't mention this, but folks can call our hotline 24/7. We are always staffed. If somebody's, feeling upset in the middle of the night and just need somebody to talk to, they can call our hotline. So that's another thing that I like to tell people. If you're starting to notice some signs and symptoms in maybe a student or a family member or somebody that you care about, and they're nervous to call Safelight because they don't think that they need our services, I just tell them, hey, like, we always have somebody on staff. Just call us and talk to us. If you're upset and you need somebody to talk to and you want to work through some of these things that's going on in your life, just give us a call. We always have somebody on the other end of the line. And so sometimes that's an easier way to get people plugged in, because they think that they need to come in and utilize all of these services. That's not it. We can just be a support. Our counseling center. So we exclusively use evidence-based modalities to address trauma. And so when folks come in for an assessment, they'll do a trauma screening. And after some time of working with our clinicians, our rates of our trauma screenings have gone down significantly. And so that's a really exciting piece, and wonderful to see these people coming in with so much trauma and so much hurt, and to watch them go through the process of healing. So we offer, it can be telehealth. They can come into our office. We can go for a walk around the block. There's a lot of different ways that counseling can look like. We also offer, and that's for all ages. So I think our youngest is 3 that we work with. We also offer support groups. So there's lots of different ways that people can get plugged into counseling, however they feel that fits best in their lives. Our child advocacy center is really, it's an amazing place. So typically when folks get called, when we get a referral for our child advocacy center, that's typically coming either from law enforcement or DSS. And so somewhere along the line, there's been a report of child abuse or neglect or exploitation. They call our child advocacy center, and we coordinate a space for all of the multiple disciplines that come in. And so this child can have one forensic interview and have all of the different disciplines sitting in an observation room somewhere else. And so that can look like law enforcement, any detectives that are involved, social workers, of course, our Safelight staff. They're going to be kind of sitting at a DSS worker, anybody that's involved in the case can sit and observe the forensic interview. And our forensic interviewers, we have 4 trained forensic interviewers. We have a bilingual forensic interviewer. So if anybody's coming in, and so oftentimes if a child discloses abuse or neglect or exploitation, they might have to repeat that over and over again. And so our goal with the Child Advocacy Center is to have one interview where everybody is in the room and can hear the interview and take notes. Our forensic interviewer will come and check in with all of the disciplines and say, do you have any more questions? Do you feel like there's anything that we still need to explore? And then the forensic interviewer will go back in and chat with that child and make sure that, we're trying to get as much information out of one visit as possible so that there's less chance of re-traumatization. And hopefully that child won't then have to testify in court. So we do all of that here on site. So we do a forensic interview. If the caregiver and the child is comfortable with it, we try to always do a child medical exam. We can test for drug screenings. We can do a hair follicle test. There's lots of different ways that we can do that. Our Family Advocacy Center, so that's where a lot of our legal support comes in. So if folks are needing support with filing for a protection order or a restraining order, they can come to our Family Advocacy Center. We have an advocate that will walk them through what that process looks like, and then also advocate for them in the courtroom and just be a navigator for them. Oftentimes people are feeling really nervous to go to court. Maybe they don't want to see their abuser in the courtroom. Maybe they're nervous about telling their story again. There's a lot of, and I mean, court is not fun for anybody, I don't think. So yeah, there's so much, having somebody there with you that knows what the process is, what room to go in, where we need to hand in our paperwork, and to walk you through all of that process while also advocating for you with the district attorney's office is really beautiful. We work really closely with our law enforcement, and so there's actually a program called the Lethality Assessment Program. If there is a call that comes in through 911 or through dispatch and it's reported domestic violence, all of the law enforcement in Henderson County are required to go through a lethality assessment with them. And so there's a list of 12 questions, and essentially, there's a score, asks different questions about how dangerous the situation is. If the score is over a certain number, that means that they automatically, that law enforcement will offer to connect them to Safelight resources or Safelight. They'll offer to call Safelight with the victim on the scene, and then they'll leave that person with Safelight resources as well. At our shelter, we always keep one room open for, we call it LAP, or a LAP call. So if there's somebody that, in the middle of the night, there's a LAP call and that person is in high danger and they're willing to come to shelter, law enforcement will transport them to Safelight shelter. We talked about our adult forensic exams. That's our SANE nurses, sexual assault nurse examiners. And then part of our Family Advocacy Center is that Camp Hope that we talked about. So Camp Hope this year is for children 17 to 13. So every year we age up. We started with 7 to 11. Last year was 7 to 12. This year is 7 to 13. And that's for a couple of different reasons. One being that our children don't age out of the program. And 2 is that we can slowly build our programming over time. So our goal is to eventually have 7 to 18. We'll have kind of 2 different, our high adventure kids and our classic kids. But there's so much potential for that program too. Once those kids start getting a little bit older, we can start introducing some life skills for them. So I talked about the summer camp portion. We have a wonderful partnership with Green River Preserve, which is where we've hosted Camp Hope for the last 2 years, and will also be this upcoming year in 2026. So there's a week-long summer camp component. And this is also an evidence-based curriculum. And so it's been proven that 1 week at this summer camp has been just as effective of 6 months of traditional talk therapy. So it's a really wonderful, it's completely free for our children. And then we have a year-round programming for it. So these kids that are going to this amazing summer camp once a year, we get to hang out with them every single month, continue to build that relationship, let them know that those children aren't alone. So if you or if anybody you know knows of a child that's been exposed to domestic violence, child abuse, anything like that, please send them over to Safelight. We would love to get them plugged into Camp Hope programming. We're really passionate. I'll speak for myself. I'm very passionate about our Camp Hope programming. It's really a wonderful piece that can help truly break that generational cycle of abuse, because again, it's these kids that have been exposed to so much trauma as a young person to then grow up and recognize that their future can be different than their past. And that's the hope that we're creating for them. So if you or anybody you know has a child that could be eligible, please send them our way. And if you or anybody you know want to volunteer with Camp Hope, we have the year-round programming. We also are always looking for volunteers for the week of camp. Community engagement. So we have one of our Safelight staff is on DSS 8 hours per week. So that's getting people connected to resources, whether that's our domestic violence intervention program or our partners in intervention program. So that's working with perpetrators of violence and going through that power and control wheel with them and helping to identify abusive behaviors. Oftentimes that can be something that is used in conjunction with or as a, maybe there's a domestic violence charge, criminal charge. Oftentimes completing a domestic violence intervention program can be used to drop or lower those charges. So a lot of our folks come to us through DSS or through the court system. Community outreach. So this is my department. This is where we get to do events like this and presentations and spread awareness, talk about what violence is and how it looks in our community and how we can get people plugged in. There's also a couple of really cool pieces. We go into the schools and we talk to kids about how to stay safe. So in the elementary school level, we talk about, we do the second step curriculum. And that's how to stay safe. What is safe and unsafe touches? Who do we go to? At the high school level, we talk about conflict and consent and what are North Carolina state, what are North Carolina state laws and statutes and regulations and what is expected of us and what does that mean? How can we break it down? What does that look like for my relationship? We also offer, so I'll talk about going into the schools. Currently, we're in the elementary schools and in the high schools. We this year submitted a curriculum. We're really hoping to get into the middle schools. Maybe that can still happen this year, but truly shooting for 2026 to be in elementary, middle, and high schools to really, again, instill these lessons and continue the conversation and not just, the middle school is such an important age to be able to talk about some of these things when we're coming into healthy and unhealthy relationships and to get kids thinking about what they want for themselves. We're not there to tell them what's right and what's wrong. We're there to tell them, to help them think about what they want for themselves and how to help set healthy boundaries. We also offer a darkness to light training, which is, we offer it to all community members and professionals that are interested. We'll do it twice a year. So we just had one in September. So our next one will be in April. So if you or anybody you know is interested in completing this, is a training on how to recognize, prevent, and respond to child sexual abuse. So it's just a wonderful, again, talking about signs and symptoms and what do we do and who do we turn to. It's wonderful awareness, and so that's open to anybody in the community that's interested in learning about that. our sustainability program. So we talked about that continuum of care and really getting folks from crisis to sustainability. So what does that look like? We offer job training programming. So people that might have been financially abused, maybe they don't have any workforce skills anymore, or maybe they're feeling really nervous. There's a couple of different job training opportunities. One, we have weekly meetings where they can work with a professional on how to build a resume and how to apply for jobs. And then there's also opportunities both at our resale store and at our cafe where survivors can, if they choose to work there, they can work in a really supportive, trauma-informed environment. And we actually just increased our program used to be 6 months, and we just increased it to a year because we saw that there was still a need for folks to gradually increase the time that they're able to work. And oftentimes people build a community and it's really hard to shift again after 6 months. So we're trying to build in a little bit more of a time for them to be able to get situated and find a more sustainable outcome. We also get folks connected to housing. So our housing manager works really closely with a lot of local landlords. So we have a list of some trauma-informed landlords in the area. We know of places that have low income or sliding scale options. We can go with people to fill out applications at the housing authority. We can walk people through that process. Our funding is a little up and down, but the goal, last year we were able to provide funding for 17 different households to be able to sign leases and slowly work with folks. You know, initially we might provide a little bit more support, and then over the course of 12 months, we lower what we're contributing towards their rent. So eventually they can have some time to get a cushion under them and a little bit more of a security net, and just really help soften some of that economic abuse that has been happening to them. So how can you support? Well, there's a bunch of different ways. Donating is of course a really wonderful one. We talked about, you know, some programs will come and deliver like a bunch of different snack bags for us. And so for our Camp Hope events or the kids that coming into our counseling center, they always have a snack bag that they can come and get. Those are from donations. Same thing with little hygiene kits. We recently put together for our monthly events for our Camp Hope programming. We put together a little sheet. You can fund a Pathways event and let us do something a little bit more exciting. You know, we try to be creative with the funds that we have, but sometimes it's nice to go apple picking or to pet llamas or do a little zip lining, things that actually cost money. So that's one way that you can help. Volunteering, attending to an event, come eat at our cafe. We recently underwent some renovations and we opened a product line. So we are currently selling, this is another way for our job training program to help survivors. Sometimes people aren't quite ready to be working directly with customers. And so working with our product line, it could be in the bagging, you know, our mix for the kosher bread or our pound cake. So come and check us out, shop at our resale store, buy some of our products and spread the word. We also have a monthly e-newsletter if y'all want to know about what we're doing in the community and when we're hosting our Darkness to Light trainings and different things like that. We're always in the community trying to make a presence. And if you're interested, you could always schedule a tour to come in and learn more and see our facilities and what we offer. And we'd love to have you over here and show you guys around. There are a couple of videos. They are on our website. I think you guys all know I'm biased to Camp Hope. But I highly recommend going to our Camp Hope page and looking at our video from Camp Hope. It is just such a special program that we offer to these kids, and they are so grateful, and it really shows in that video. And you get to hear some of the caregivers talk about their experience in working with Camp Hope. And that was a really cool thing too, because we, our videographer decided one day he gifted us this creating this video for us. And so he just showed up at one of our monthly events and just asked caregivers on the spot, would you be interested in being interviewed? And so none of these parents that are in the video knew that they were going to be interviewed. There was no prep involved. They just showed up and spoke from the heart. And it's a really beautiful video. So I
Whitney,
encourage you to go check it out.
can you share this PowerPoint with me afterwards? Because I'll send it out to everybody.
Absolutely.
Great.
I'll give y'all a moment too if you want to scan and get connected to any of our social media platforms, or of course it will be in the PowerPoints, and Dr. Sarah can share that with y'all as well. More resources in our community. So we are, and we help anybody in Henderson County. We of course want to help people in other counties as well, but there oftentimes are services closer to them that are a little bit easier. So in Buncombe County, that is Helpmate. In Transylvania County, that's Safe. Polk County is Steps to Hope. And that NCCADV is a really wonderful website. The North Carolina Coalition Against Domestic Violence, they have amazing trainings and resources and safety plans. And then of course on the radar, some national numbers that are a little bit easier to connect to sometimes. So thank you all for having me and taking the time to sit in with me. I wanted to save a few minutes in case there are any questions. I have not been checking the chat, but yeah. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions or ideas?